Hello, good to have you back. We're in Revelation chapter 17. We're studying a book that was written to comfort Christians in the face of the terrible struggle they were about to enter into with Rome. It was Christ and the church against the devil in Rome. We just concluded a study of chapters 15 and 16. And we talked about the bowls that were poured out in judgment upon the oppressor. We made the point last time and looked at chapter 22 and verse 18. We made the point last time that these judgments were not to be historically fulfilled. That there are some visions in Revelation that do speak of historical affairs. And that there are some visions in Revelation that simply speak truths to us. Timeless truths. So that in the study of the book of Revelation, we have both historical predictions, which I believe have all already been fulfilled. But we also have timeless truths in association with those historical predictions. And the last ones we looked at were God judging the Roman oppressor. And the description of that judgment is in the terms of plagues that were poured out upon him. And those plagues are simply visionary offerings, visionary devices which speak of the spiritual reality that God does indeed judge the impenitent oppressors of his people and the violators of his law. Now then, in chapters 17 and 18, these two go together. And we deal with the judgment of the whore. Now, who is the whore? There's no doubt in my mind who this prostitute is. There are marks given in 17 and in 18, which it seems to me lifts the thing out of the realm of argument. In chapter 17 and in verse 7, we are told that the woman who sits upon a beast with 7 heads, it carries her. She's supported by that beast. We hear in verse 9 that the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Now, people, I'm not trying to snow you, but you can find out for yourself. This expression, the 7 mountains, has been used of Rome right from the very early beginnings of Rome. This woman sits on 7 mountains. And then we're told in verse 18, the woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Not will reign over the kings of the earth. Not did reign over the kings of the earth. But this is the woman, the Greek says, which possesses a kingdom over the earth. While John is getting his letter, who is ruling the world? Rome, of course. So there are 2 pointers right there. The woman is the ruler of the kings of the earth. The woman does sit on 7 hills. She's the persecutor of the saints in John's day, that is in John's visions, chapter 17 and verse 6. Who is the kingdom whose center was in a city that sat on 7 hills? Rome. Who was the city when John is receiving his vision that rules the kings of the earth? Rome. Who is the city when John receives the vision that persecutes the saints? Rome. And who is it in chapter 18 who's the leading commercial power of the world in John's day? Rome. There are those who say the woman is perverted false religion, the apostate church. Well, did the apostate church rule the world in John's day? No. Was the apostate church in John's day the leading commercial power on earth? No. And did God judge the apostate church in accordance with the writing of this book in a relatively short time after John wrote the Revelation? No. It'll hardly be the Catholic Church. It'll hardly be the apostate religious movement. And besides, look at chapter 18 and see for yourself. We're not talking about a religious movement at all. We're talking about the leading commercial power on earth. We'll read that when we get to 18. There. Here we go in chapter 17. It came one of the seven angels that had the seven bowls and said, "Come here, and I'll show you the judgment of the great harlot that sits upon many waters." Now he's recapping. He's repeating. Now he's changing the figure from a city, chapter 16, verse 19, to a woman. The figure changes to a woman. But he hasn't really moved from a city, because he'll tell you in chapter 17 and in verse 18 that though it's a woman that's in the figure, it's a city that's under consideration. So he repeats the judgment on the city that's mentioned in chapter 16, verse 19. And he goes into some details as to how that city is judged. 17:1. Let me show you the judgment of the great harlot that sits upon many waters. The many waters, according to 17:15, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. She's sitting on many waters. She rules over nations in John's day. That's not Jerusalem. That's not Jerusalem at all. Jerusalem doesn't sit on seven hills. Read Edersheim for yourself. And if anybody knows about Jerusalem, Edersheim does. It sits on four hills to begin with. It certainly wasn't the leading commercial power in the world in John's day. And it certainly didn't rule the kings of the earth in John's day. No, sir. Let me show you the great harlot that sits on many waters. Let me show you her judgment. Verse 2, 17:2. This is the woman with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and they that dwell on the earth were made drunken with the wine of her fornication. Everybody wanted to go to bed with this hooker. Everybody wanted to make an alliance with her. Why would they? She's seductive. This is Rome. This prostitute is Rome. Not from her civil, military standpoint. Not from her perverted religious standpoint. But from her worldly successful standpoint. From her worldly seductive, commercially prosperous standpoint. All the kings of the earth want to make alliances with her. They all want to climb into bed with her. The merchants of the earth, we'll hear in chapter 18, are made rich by going to bed with her. How come she's so seductive? How come she's so appealing? Because to go to bed with her is to prosper. You see? What makes her so prosperous? What makes her so successful? She's supported by the military power of her legions, the red beast that she rides on. We'll see that in a moment. 17:3. He carries me in the spirit into a wilderness. I see a woman sitting, scarlet-colored beast. She's sitting on a scarlet-colored beast. We'll say a little bit more about that in a moment, though we've already talked about that back in chapter 13. We'll say a little bit more about it. She's sitting on a scarlet-colored beast. That beast has names full of blasphemy. It has 7 heads and 10 horns. It's Rome, looking at it from its military, its civil persecuting power aspect. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet. She's a fake royalty, isn't she? She's got all this gold and precious stones and pearls. She has in her hand a golden cup full of abominations, even the unclean things of her fornication. She has a name written on her forehead. Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of the harlots and of the abominations of the earth. She's the happy hooker. She's the mother of all the hookers. Did you know that they've got coins from ancient times where Rome is pictured as a mother with a number of breasts and everybody is being suckled by her? Yeah. This is the big number one whore of the world. Max King likes to tell us that she's the wife of the Lord. Where does it say she's a wife? Nowhere. It nowhere intimates that she's a wife to anybody, much less to the Lord. This isn't Israel. It's Rome. I saw the woman, verse 6, drunken with the blood of the saints, with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And I wondered with a wonder, and the angel said, why do you wonder? Let me tell you. Let me tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast it carries, that it has the 7 heads and 10 horns. He said, see that beast? You see that beast that you saw? The beast you saw it knew a phase of persecuting power. But that's gone. That died with Nero. That was phase 1 of the beast. It is not. While John has his vision, the beast is not. Okay? But it's about to come up out of the abyss. Revelation wasn't written in 95. Good night, Domitian was on the throne and was about to die the next year. Beast wasn't about to come up out of the abyss in 95. Henry Barclay Sweet sees the problem there. So does Ray Summers. So does William Barclay. They all see the problem. Summers doesn't handle it at all. You know what Barclay and Sweet do? Barclay specifically takes this piece and says, this was an earlier prophecy, and it was stuck in the middle of the book. Well, that won't do you and me. Sweet and Barclay also suggest the possibility that John is writing it down as though he had gotten the vision in the days of Vespasian to keep himself from being persecuted by the current emperor. That'd be a silly thing to do since he was already on the Isle of Patmos being punished for his faith. Huh? That'd make no sense. Oh, no. Notice this, and then I'll leave it alone. The beast knows 3 phases. A was phase. That died with Nero when one of the 7 heads was smitten. The animal died. While John's receiving the vision, the beast is not. Is not. But there's a Roman emperor on the throne. Yes, there is. That's true. But the beast still is not. That means that it's not devouring the saints. The empire is not jumping all over the saints at this point. That's not saying that some Christians here and there aren't suffering. Of course they are. But the empire hasn't turned on them. The beast knew a phase that died with Nero. The beast, while John is getting the vision, is in an is not phase. But, he is told, it's about to come up out of the abyss. It's going to know a resurrection. The beast is going to resurrect out of the abyss. Chapter 11, verse 8, to persecute the saints. Now then, but it is going to go into perdition. And it's going to go into perdition in the 8th head. In Revelation, the beast is not viewed as having more than 8 heads. We'll see head number 8 in verse 11. The beast is not viewed as having more than 8. Someone said there were a lot more emperors than 8. Sure, I know that. And so do you. But in Domitian, the beast comes up out of the abyss and begins to persecute. And it's in Domitian, the representative of the Roman Empire. It's in Domitian, the resurrected beast. It's in Domitian, the persecutor of the saints, the resurrected beast, and the one who claims godhood. It's in Domitian that Rome is judged. It's in Domitian that John sees Rome judged. And it makes no difference that there were other emperors after Rome, or after Domitian. For Rome in Domitian has already been judged. Someone says, well, it didn't look like a big deal to me that Domitian died. I mean, there was no worldwide shaking or anything. There was no worldwide shaking at Pentecost either. My master became King of Kings and Lord of Lords at the latest on Pentecost. But Rome still ruled on and acted as if there was no difference. But you and I know there was a difference. When God destroyed Domitian, he destroyed a man who resurrected the beast. He destroyed the man who was Rome's representative. He destroyed the man who claimed godhood. And that said to our people, Rome in Domitian is judged. The beast was said to have died in Nero. The beast was said to have died in Nero. But Rome didn't cease to exist. No, sir. Now then, verse 8. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss, and to go into perdition in the 8th head. And they that dwell on the earth will wonder, they whose names are not written in the book of life, when they behold the beast, how that he was, and is not, and shall come. Survive. This beast resurrected. Here's the mind that is wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains in which the woman sits. The woman is Rome, the city of Rome. And they, the 7 heads, are also 7 kings. 5 are fallen. We've talked about this. Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero. Those are the 5 that are falling. One is, that's Vespasian. There are 3 skipped over between Nero and Vespasian. Why is that? Well, because they were rather unimportant to begin with, but that's not the big issue. The big issue is that in Daniel chapter 7, they were uprooted. So John doesn't deal with 11. He only deals with 8. So 3 are uprooted. And he goes from Nero to Vespasian, ignoring 3. One is Vespasian. One is not yet come. And Henry Barclay's suite reminds us of the idea of imminence here. And when he cometh, Titus, he must continue a little while. He won't continue long. 2 years, 2 months, and 20 days. Now, Foy Wallace and a number of others begin with Julius Caesar. That's the first blunder. He wasn't the first Roman emperor. Augustus was. 27 BC to 14 AD. And then number 2, in order to support his view, Foy has to exclude Vespasian and Titus as mock rulers. Mock rulers? Vespasian was the one man that brought stability to the Roman Empire after the Civil War, and he ruled for a solid 10 years. Titus was one of the most popular of all the Roman emperors, son of the famous Vespasian. No mock ruler there. That won't work. Now then, Titus is the one who's to come. And the beast that was and is not is himself also an 8th. There's an 8th head. The number 8's the number of resurrection. The beast is coming back up again. He's of the 7. Look back and you'll see him in the 7. Where? In the person of Nero. He's a successor to Nero. He's a sub-Nero, Tertullian calls him. He's a limb of the bloody Nero, Tertullian calls him. But he's of the 7, and he goes into perdition. The beast goes into perdition in the 8th head. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings. These are the client kings of Rome. These are the provinces and the kingdoms of Rome that help them govern the whole world that they rule over. In our study of Daniel, we saw in Daniel chapter 2, verses 41 and following, that the fourth kingdom is to be a divided kingdom. And the division in the kingdom is stressed by iron and clay mixed. When he goes on to explain what that means, he says it means that the iron and the clay means they mingle themselves with the seed of men. But like iron and clay won't mix, it won't hold together well. There'll be that inner weakness because although they make alliances and although they give authority to those who acknowledge them, it won't stick together. There's an inner weakness here. In the book of Daniel chapter 11, 36 through 39, we hear of Rome giving power to those who acknowledge him, dividing the land for a price. Whoever will acknowledge him, he'll give the authority to rule for him. This is the kind of thing we're reading here. The 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet. But they receive authority as kings with the beast. They're a part of the beast. But they're a part of the beast because they ally themselves to him. But they're not the beast itself, if you understand. Let me read it again. The 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet. But they receive authority as kings with the beast. Now they're a part of the beast, and yet they're held as distinct from the beast. Verse 13 says, these horns have one mind, and they give their power and their authority unto the beast. They're the beast's allies. They acknowledge the beast, and he lets them rule. They acknowledge the beast, and he gives them power as kings to live with him and reign with him. Okay? Verse 14 says, these shall war against the Lamb. And verse 13, one more time. These have one mind, they give their power and authority unto the beast. That lets you know that those horns aren't Roman emperors. Those horns aren't Roman emperors. For they'd be just as much the beast as any of the other heads, you say. No. These are kings who give to Rome their authority and power. And because they acknowledge Rome, Rome lets them rule with them over the earth, you see. 14, these will war against the Lamb will whip them. Why? Because he is Lord of Lords and King of Kings. He doesn't become Lord of Lords because he whips them. He whips them because he's already that. And they overcome who are with him because they're chosen and faithful. He explains in 15 that the waters that the harlot sits on are peoples and nations. In verse 16 he says, the 10 horns which you saw and the beast, these shall hit the harlot. And they'll desolate and make her naked. They'll eat her flesh and they'll burn her utterly with fire. Her own friends are burning her. Well, how did the prostitute be Rome and the beast be Rome? Oh, that's no difficulty at all. Can you name me a nation that didn't devour itself? Can you name me a nation whose own inner turmoils didn't destroy it? I mean, all the way from Cuba to America in the 19th century, in Civil War here, to Ireland going on right now. Stalin and the Russians raped one another. Mao Zedong and Chiang Kai-shek finally got into it and raped one another. All of the major nations rape one another. Themselves, elements within the nation. So nations are divided against nation. And we hear that the 10 horns and the beast hate the harlot and burn her up. Her friends end up burning her. Well, Nero burned Rome at one point, you know. Nero burned it. Didn't mean to burn as much as he burned it. Got out of hand, but he burned a fire out of that thing. And these 10 horns and the beast turn on the prostitute. What destroyed her seductiveness? What destroyed her success? What destroyed her power? Division, inner division. Read the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. And one of the elements listed by Edward Gibbon for the decline and the fall of Rome was the fact that she wasn't able to control her provinces or her kingdoms. They weakened her from the inside. That's Daniel 2, 41 through 43. And it's Daniel 11, 36 through 39. And it's Revelation 17. Now all of this is viewed as happening to Rome at the hand of God. For verse 17 says, God did put in their heart, the heart of the horns. God did put in their hearts to do His mind, and to come to one mind, and to give their kingdom to the beast. These horns are not emperors. These horns are provinces and kingdoms, allied with the beast. The treaties and the alliances were to hold the kingdom together. But that ended up being one of the elements that destroyed the kingdom. And so the Lord worked all of that out. Worked it out that the kings and the provinces give their power unto the beast until the words of God should be accomplished. The woman, He said, is Rome. The woman rules, not did rule, not will rule, but that woman rules the kings of the earth. That's chapter 17. Now, chapter 18 will describe the woman in the city figure. Will speak of her overthrow as the leading commercial power in the world. When we read 18, you'll see what I mean when I say this city is not a religious city. It's the leading commercial power in the world. Of course, there's some religion involved in Rome. That you know. But in 18, we learn that this city is the leading commercial power of the world. See you next time, okay?